In the hidden valleys of the Himalayas, ancient scrolls were discovered that contain wisdom so profound, yet so simple, that they've been kept from public knowledge. Until now. What I'm about to share with you isn't found in common Buddhist texts. These are the rare teachings that monks have preserved through oral tradition for centuries. Teachings about how our minds distort reality and create suffering. My journey began 3 years ago when I was invited to a remote monastery. The head monk, who had never before spoken to outsiders, shared with me a teaching called the Four Inversions of Mind, also known as the Four Distortions or Four Vipallāsas in traditional Pali texts. These inversions are actually mentioned in the Vipallāsas Sutta within the Anguttara Nikaya, but their deeper meaning has been obscured through time and translation. Unlike the Four Noble Truths that most Buddhist scholars discuss, these inversions reveal why our minds create suffering, even when we think we're pursuing happiness. The first inversion is what Buddhist scholars call Eternalism, or Sasatavada in Pali. This is the belief that there exists a permanent, unchanging self that persists through time. The ancient texts describe how we grasp for permanence in an impermanent world, creating the very suffering we're trying to avoid. The ancient monks called this chasing the shadow while running from the light. This view fundamentally contradicts the Buddhist concept of impermanence or anicca. When we believe in an eternal self, we resist change, cling to pleasurable experiences, and avoid unpleasant ones, creating a cycle of craving and dissatisfaction that can never be fulfilled. The second inversion reveals that our search for happiness in external things is like trying to quench thirst by drinking salt water. It only creates more thirst. In traditional Buddhist texts, this is related to materialism, the belief that material possessions and physical comfort are the primary sources of happiness. The ancient teachings explain that true happiness cannot be found in external things because they are inherently impermanent. Material possessions can never fully satisfy our deepest needs. Clinging to them leads to dissatisfaction, anxiety, and a cycle of craving and attachment that the Buddha identified as the root of suffering. In these ancient teachings, the remedy isn't renunciation of the world, but a practice called the middle way of perception. This isn't the standard middle way you might have heard about. The traditional Buddha's middle way transcends the extremes of eternalism and nihilism, finding balance between affirmation and negation, existence and non-existence. What the ancient texts revealed to me went deeper, showing how this principle applies to our everyday perceptions, not just philosophical views. The third inversion shows that the self we think we're protecting is actually an illusion, but not in the way modern Buddhism often explains it. This relates to what scholars call Selfism or Sakkaya Ditthi in Pali, the belief in a fixed and independent self. The ancient scrolls describe it as the rider who doesn't realize he is also the horse. In Buddhist philosophy, this self-clinging creates suffering because it reinforces the illusion of duality and prevents us from experiencing the interconnectedness of all things. The self is not a separate entity, but a collection of interconnected physical and mental processes or skandhas that are constantly changing. Now I want to share with you the rare meditation technique that accompanies these teachings. It's called the breath of two skies. As you breathe in, visualize the vast sky above. As you breathe out, visualize an equally vast sky below. You exist in the space between these two infinities, perfectly balanced. This practice helps to dissolve the boundaries of self, allowing you to experience the spaciousness of non-attachment. This practice was reserved only for monks who had completed 10,000 hours of preliminary meditations. But the elders believe our troubled world needs this wisdom now. The fourth inversion teaches that suffering doesn't come from difficult experiences, but from our resistance to them. In Buddhist texts, this relates to nihilism or ukkedavada, the belief that there is no self, no afterlife, and no karmic consequences. This view can lead to a sense of meaninglessness and despair. The ancient text describes it as fighting against the river that could carry you home. The Buddha taught that while the self is not fixed or permanent, our actions do have consequences through the law of karma. Each action creates an imprint that influences our future experiences, not as punishment or reward, but as a natural unfolding of cause and effect. When I applied this wisdom to my own life, everything changed. Not because my circumstances were different, but because I was different within those same circumstances. I began to see how my mind was creating inversions, seeing permanence where there was change, seeking happiness in external things, clinging to a fixed sense of self, and resisting difficult experiences instead of working with them. The Four Inversions are not just philosophical concepts, but have profound psychological effects. Selfism can lead to anxiety and low self-esteem as we constantly compare ourselves to others. Eternalism can result in fear of change and difficulty coping with loss. Nihilism can contribute to depression and apathy. Materialism can foster dissatisfaction and a sense of emptiness. By understanding these patterns, we can begin to loosen their grip and cultivate healthier mental habits. These teachings aren't asking you to believe anything. They're inviting you to experiment with a different way of seeing. As the ancient text says, truth is not heard but realized. The Four Inversions are deeply connected to what Buddhist practitioners call the four thoughts that turn the mind from samsara, reflections on the precious human rebirth, impermanence and death, karma, and the defects of cyclic existence. By recognizing the inversions, we can fully appreciate these thoughts and embark on a path towards greater freedom and clarity. In my next video, I'll share the second part of these teachings, the practice of compassionate detachment that transformed my relationships forever. We'll explore how to overcome spiritual materialism, a concept described by the Tibetan teacher Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche as the tendency to use spiritual practices to reinforce the ego rather than transcend it. If this wisdom resonates with you, share it with someone who might benefit. Ancient wisdom reminds us that knowledge only becomes power when it's shared and used.